Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Egg Whisperer Show. I'm Dr. Amy, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Abby Eblen, Dr. Carrie Bedient, and Dr. Susan Hudson. Together, they are the Fertility Docs, board-certified reproductive endocrinologists, podcast hosts of Fertility Docs Uncensored, and authors of their new book, The IVF Blueprint. Two of the fertility docs are IVF moms themselves, and all three run thriving clinics across the country. They bring clarity, warmth, and evidence-based guidance to one of the most emotional journeys many families face. I'm so excited to learn more about your book, so let's jump right in. You have a popular podcast and work together often. How did the book come about, and how did you draw from your experiences as doctors and patients in creating it?
We had decided really when we started the podcast, we made some goals about things that we really wanted to do. And so that was kind of one of the things on the list. And I don't know, the time was just right. We started working on it. The reason we did it was because we get so many questions on our podcast about IVF. Patients only have about 30 minutes during their consult with their doctor. And while we go through a lot of that, and I'm sure you do too, a lot of times patients don't do IVF for several months and they really don't have a way to remind themselves about what we talked about. So the idea behind the book was to really make it a handbook so that when somebody goes through IVF, they'll be able to reference what they're doing at each step and be able to get more information.
That's great. And early in the book, you talk about how overwhelming IVF can feel. From your perspective, what's the root of that overwhelm? And how can both patients and doctors make the process more manageable?
I think really there is power in knowledge. And most of the time, when people are overwhelmed, it's because they're scared and it's because they just don't understand what's going on. I remember when I was going through my own IVF journey and the times I cried, which I cried just like everybody else does during their IVF journey. It is when things didn't match up. And it was like, why are we doing this? Why did something change? Things weren't going according to what I in my brain had as the plan. And it's the same slide that everybody else goes down. And so we wanted to help give a good, solid reference of why your doctor may do different things. There's no one way to do IVF. There's no one couple that's exactly like another couple. And what we really intended with this book was to show a variety of ways and reasonings behind what we find is important and to be able to use that in your personal journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much of what we do as doctors is helping patients understand what to expect at each stage. How do you approach that? Giving patients enough information to feel prepared without creating extra stress.
So much of what patient anxiety focuses on is the uncertainty of what will or won't happen. And so there's two parts to this. So one part is giving them the information they need for right now, because, well, yes, at the very first visit, we could tell them everything about the IVF retrieval cycle and the uterine preparation and the transfer cycle and all the lab work. It doesn't make sense to do that at that point. And so it's figuring out, how do we get a bite-sized piece of information that's very relevant to what the patient is going through right now and presenting it. The other part of it is the anticipatory guidance, because we all know some of the pain points that patients have. You know that when you get 20 eggs out and you are only going to get, 1, 2, 3, however many embryos at the end of it, that patient is going to freak out about that if they're not prepared for it. And so as a result, you tell somebody, at the time of their retrieval, before, during, after, okay, you have 20 eggs. You will not have 20 embryos. This is normal. This is expected. This is what we want. You want to see that natural selection in process because you don't want to transfer all the ones that are never going to make it. And so a lot of it is that real anticipatory guidance. How do we help people deal with some of the uncertainty in the big ways that will send them into one of those tailspins?
Yeah, because as human beings, we always want 100%. That's what's ingrained in us from such an early age. Like A plus isn't getting one embryo out of 20. One out of 20 feels like failure. But if you reframe it, it makes the patients feel less afraid and scared and worried. But no matter what we say, though, sometimes they still feel overwhelmed. But it's good that we're hand holding our patients. So you dedicate space to lifestyle and supplements, and I'm sure you get so many questions about that. It's like one of the first questions I get asked after a transfer is like, what should I eat? What should I do? In your experience, what advice has been the most helpful, and what should patients look for when choosing supplements?
I think we would all agree that prenatal vitamins are important. So prenatal vitamins, I personally ask them to take extra folic acid because it's one of those things you can't get too much of it. You can only get too little. And then also vitamin D. I think over the years in checking vitamin D levels, most of us know that most of our patients have really low vitamin D levels. So that's one of the ones I really think they need to take. And then, it depends on where they're at and sometimes age related. So CoQ10 is another good supplement. And so I think it really kind of depends on the patient. In terms of what to look for, there's different ways that you can look at supplements, and you want to make sure that they really have what they say they have in them. And so there's some different certifications. USP is one, and I know Nature Made Vitamins have that certification that an outside source has really looked at those vitamins to make sure that they really have the right components in it. And so I think the quality of your vitamins is also important as well.
Yeah. In addition to USP, the other designation is NSF, and those are really designations to show that a third party has proven that what you expect to be in your vitamins is truly what's in there and at the appropriate dosages. A lot of people don't realize that vitamins and supplements aren't regulated by the FDA or the Food and Drug Administration, so you have to take these folks at their word. And unfortunately, there's some pretty good data to say that a lot of these companies are lying to consumers. I would rather you take something than nothing, but sometimes you are getting what you pay for. So sometimes paying a little bit more for those vitamins that have those designations are going to help you get all the vitamins, nutrients, antioxidants that we're searching for to improve your chances of success.
And sometimes too with gummy vitamins, even though, I think they're much easier to take and they taste better, sometimes they don't have a lot of vitamin there. It's more the gelatin component. So I really recommend that patients actually take pills rather than gummies if they can.
Mm-hmm. We found when we were writing the supplement chapter of the book that number one, we had to divide it 3 ways. And number 2, it was like writing a term paper. I mean, you figure all doctors are professional students, and holy cow, I was back in some of my senior level writing classes trying to figure out, now, how do I cite this and how do I make sure that I have the correct number of sources and that everything is pulled together in a succinct, easily understandable way. And I think all 3 of us went through that process, particularly with that chapter, because it required so much data diving.
Yeah. The other supplement I would add that I find helpful, and I imagine you do too, is something that boosts NAD levels in cells, something like OVA NAD or something similar. I've been recommending that for a while now. And then what is your lifestyle recommendation around activity when you're doing an egg retrieval? I get that question a lot, an activity after an embryo transfer.
I think a good guideline is life in moderation. Okay. We don't want you going off the deep end one way or the other. When you're very close to your egg retrieval, we're going to want to start reducing that exercise and those types of things. But through most of your fertility journey, a good balanced diet, something like a Mediterranean style diet, is a good place to start. Doing moderate exercise, getting your body moving. Going through pregnancy is one of the hardest things your body is going to go through in your lifetime. And so we really want you to be in as good a shape as you possibly can, but we also don't want you in a very aggressive way of losing weight if we're actively trying to get you pregnant. Now, if we're preparing for something and you're losing the pounds, that's great, but that's not the best thing necessarily during an egg retrieval.
Yeah. So be gentle with yourself. That's not the time to worry about your weight. So I love that the book also takes patients behind the scenes into the lab, from egg retrieval to embryo development to genetic testing. Why is transparency so important about the lab, and what do patients need to know about the scientific and lab side of IVF?
It's so important to have transparency in and throughout the IVF cycle, especially in the lab component, because the patients are never going to directly see that. We're walking in and out of the lab all day, in our booties and in our hair caps and with our lab coats on and through the swipe key card doors. And so we know everything that goes on there, but they don't. And it's very nerve-wracking because they don't know what we're doing with their eggs and sperm and embryos. And they don't necessarily realize that there's computer matching going on to make sure the names are the same. There's always a second, if not third person who's cross-checking their names. So it's not just, oh, you check in at the front. It's you get your bracelet and then it's checked in the pre-op area, in the OR, by the embryology lab. There's a dual set of checks that happen in the lab, then when they come into the room, and then when they go back into the lab. Every time they take out your embryos from their incubator, there's cross-checking that's happening. And so knowing a lot of that is really important. Knowing that there's a ton of quality control that occurs in the lab. They are constantly looking at the pH, the temperature, the air quality parameters, the oxygen levels, CO2 levels, nitrogen levels. That's all being monitored constantly. And we always joke that fertility docs are compulsive. Embryologists are way more compulsive.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. And so when you combine the compulsiveness of most people who work in a fertility clinic, it ends up being a very safe environment. But like we talked about before, there will always be decreases in numbers along the way. There is a funnel effect. The number of eggs you get is not going to be the number of embryos you get. That's good. You don't want it to be that way because even in a really healthy 35-year-old, 40% of the eggs coming out are going to be abnormal. And that's expected. And so you don't want to put those embryos back. And so being able to understand, yes, these numbers are going to go down. No, not every embryo is going to make a baby is very helpful so that they understand the realities of the world that we work in and what science and biology can do and what they can't do.
Yeah, I mean, explain that so well.
I think it's also really important that they know about the procedure itself, because I think the average person, when they come in and you start talking about an egg retrieval, they don't have a concept for how we do it. It just doesn't make sense to them, particularly based on the models most of us have in our office of the uterus. It just doesn't make sense. And so we try to discuss that in the book and explain that in detail. We also try to explain, who's going to be back there with you, who you're going to meet, kind of walk them through the whole process. Because I think, if you don't know what's going to happen, that's when you have a whole lot more anxiety. And so I think by letting them know the type of people they're going to meet and what each person's role is also helps to reduce their stress and anxiety about the procedure.
Yeah. I tell patients, you might feel like a car at a pit stop at a NASCAR race. It's like everyone's like putting on the monitor, getting your blood pressure, putting your legs up, telling you to scoot down.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
And then the older I get, the funnier I think I am. So I tell the patient at the end, clap twice, touch your nose, because it feels like we're playing, almost like we're playing Simon Says.
Yeah.
In the OR at times. So IVF has changed a lot, and more people are turning to it for different family building reasons. What kind of trends or changes are you seeing in how patients approach IVF today?
I think one of the most exciting things is with people getting more and more access to IVF through their insurance, through their employers and things like that, is that when they come in to talk to me about having a baby, I can talk to them about their family goals. I don't have to just focus on the here and now. I can plan their treatment based on what their true hopes and dreams are. And so I think that's one of the most exciting things is that, you come in to see me and you're 34 years old and you tell me you want to have 3 children. That's a very different conversation than if you're 34-year-old and you say it's one and done. And so it makes me feel good that I'm able to really look at the future and not just solve the immediate problem, but lay the groundwork so we're going to have success in the future.
Yeah. And we're hope and dream dealers. And, we're all very empathetic people talking to one another today. What would you say to someone who's not getting that? I think everyone should get that conversation with their doctor, but you and I both know that that's not happening. So how can a patient who, let's say, doesn't have a choice with where she can go because she's limited by where she lives, how would you recommend that she advocate for herself if she's not getting that kind of conversation with her doctor?
I mean, I think she should probably, make a list of questions. And, sometimes I think when people get in front of their doctor, they kind of freeze up and they don't know what to ask. And so I think it's really helpful to come up with questions. I think it's important to talk to friends who have been through to get some sense for what their experience was. And that way they can compare and contrast, because sometimes I think patients see things that we do and they feel like that's not what other physicians would do. And then when they kind of see, almost like the egg conversation, where not every egg is going to make an embryo, when they see that sort of this is the way kind of the flow is in the clinic, I think they better understand, like, yeah, I'm coming in and I'm going to maybe not see the doctor. I'm going to have my ultrasound, I'm going to have my blood draw, and then I'm going to leave. And so I think just talking to other people, they can get a sense for what they should expect. But if they're not getting that, I think it's really important for them to bring it up with their doctor or with their nurse so that they do get the experience they hope for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's also important to know that although your physician, nurses, medical assistants, administrative staff are all part of your family building team, that it's important that if you need to go outside of that realm to get the support you need, that's okay. All right. If you need to seek a mental health professional, or you need to join a support group, or you need to just start writing in a diary to get some of those emotions out of you and in a safe place. Those are all very, very good things to do. And not every physician and patient are going to be a perfect personality match. And so if you live in a place where there's lots of doctors to choose from, then sometimes you can pick your physician based on that. But that's, as you mentioned, that's not always a possibility because of geography. Most fertility doctors are in major metropolitan areas, and quite frankly, most people in the United States actually don't live in those areas. They have to travel to get to the care that they need. And so going through some of these other avenues can kind of build a bridge for maybe what may be missing.
Yeah. True story. I had a patient once who told me to stop being so happy and stop being so positive with her. And I said, I just can't change how much I believe that this is going to work for you. I just can't change that. And she was angry. And she transformed once she, obviously reached her goals. But that was a very funny, we still laugh about it together. I still tease her about it, about how she said, literally, like, it was a dead serious conversation. It wasn't like, can you stop being so happy? It was like, we need to talk. You're just too happy of a person for me. So I understand what you're saying, when sometimes it could be a mismatch between the doctor and the patient.
The other thing to keep in mind is when you're going through infertility, you are going through a grieving process. No one grows up thinking, hey, I want to do IVF. That's how I want to have my baby. And so you really are going through a grieving process. And sometimes as you're doing that, you end up having some anger that goes towards those who are trying to help you. And we understand that. But I think it's also very insightful to recognize, hey, I am going through this grieving process. I have a medical condition called celiac, where essentially I'm one of those people who really can't eat gluten. And I remember when I first got diagnosed, it was very isolating. And I came home from work one day and I was angry. And my husband turns at me and he's like, why are you angry at me? And I'm like, I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at everything. And it was one of the most wonderful moments of my life, because I didn't even realize it until that moment.
So where do you see the future of IVF and fertility care headed, if you were to make some predictions?
I think that it's going to expand to people who otherwise would never consider having families, would never be able to have families. So, for example, we've already seen an explosion of care being able to be given to LGBTQIA plus patients. So whether they have a partner of the same sex, of a different sex, someone who's transitioned, whatever it may be, we're expanding more and more our ability to get good care to those patients, to get them what they need, and to do it in an inclusive environment where they don't feel like they're the odd person out. I think the other area that's going to continue to transform is the genetic testing that's being done. And where we started with just PGTA, being able to see, do you have 46 chromosomes, no more, no less, and male and female, and then PGTM with single gene mutations like Tay-Sachs, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia. Now it's expanding further out. So you've got the structural mutations for people who carry translocations. You've got PGTP for people who carry these polygenic traits that are not a real easy identify one gene, therefore you have a problem, therefore we avoid that embryo. We look more at the folks who have maybe a handful of embryos for those who are fortunate enough for that, and say, okay, you have a really nasty family history of diabetes. These embryos are more prone to that. So maybe we don't transfer those first. Maybe we transfer these other ones first, and help to shape some of those discussions going forwards so that some of the big known problems we can avoid from the beginning rather than having to scramble into treatment, which depends a lot on what's your insurance and what's your access and what's your health literacy level. And so I think that's really going to continue to rapidly evolve. It's already rapidly evolving, but I think it's going to continue to just be a roller coaster that goes 100 miles an hour at improving those capabilities.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up PGTP because I think a lot of patients aren't offered it. And I feel like you can't give informed consent about genetic screening of your embryos unless you know what all your options are. And so many patients are just told about just standard PGTA. I'm one of the only doctors in Northern California that offers PGTP. The fact that you brought it up, I think, is huge. I think including in your book is really helpful so patients can then advocate for it. And if they aren't able to get it at the clinic that they're going to, then they can find another option. Because once your embryos are biopsied, I get patients who come to me and say, I want to do PGTP on my previously biopsied embryos, and I don't want to do double biopsies just for PGTP, ideally. But thank you for bringing that up and bringing awareness to that. When you think about the book reaching both patients and doctors, what is the key message you hope each group takes away?
Well, for doctors, we really want them to know that we want to put this information out to help them. We don't want them to feel that we're trying to supersede what they're telling the patient. We make a couple of points in the book to say, there's more than one way to do this. If your doctor does something different than what we mentioned, just ask your doctor. I'm sure they have a good reason for that. So we really want it to be helpful for physicians, actually for family members as well. Instead of a patient having to go to the family member and explain all the details of IVF, they can just say, hey, look at this chapter and read about this. And for patients, the same. We just want patients to be able, at any stage in their journey, whether they're starting out and they're thinking about doing IVF, whether they're right in the middle of it, or after they've already finished and they're still thinking about their FET, their frozen embryo transfer, we want them to be able to jump around in the book without having to read the whole book. So it really is something that will be a reference for them when they come in for each of their visits or afterwards, after IVF is even over with.
We very intentionally thought of both physicians and patients when we wrote this book to make sure that it was really going to be more of a help than a hindrance. None of us wanted to go to our national meeting and somebody throw our book at us. And we also recognize that there's a lot of noise out there. And just because it's loud does not mean that the information is accurate. And we wanted to give good, strong, reliable information to those who are seeking it.
Can you please tell us where people can find you if they would like to work with you?
So I'm Dr. Carrie Bedient, and I'm the one in fabulous Las Vegas, the Fertility Center of Las Vegas. Our website, we do a lot of remote telemedicine consults. We see patients from all over the world. And so if anyone wants to find my little component of that world, that's where you find me.
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm not on Broadway. That's the place when people come to Nashville where they mostly want to go, but I'm not very far from there. We are always accepting new patients, and certainly you can go onto our website and we would love to see you.
And I am at Texas Fertility Center. I actually have 2 locations. One is in New Braunfels, Texas, which is right in between San Antonio and Austin. And my other location is in Corpus Christi, Texas, which is on the Texas coast. And I also do a lot of telemedicine and see patients from all over.
Love it. And where can listeners find your book? Oh, Carrie, were you going to add something?
I was going to add, for the podcast, the Fertility Docs Uncensored, you can go to fertilitydocsuncensored.com, and that's our website. And so that'll give you information on locating the podcast, which you can find at all the normal podcast locales. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of those usual places. That website will also give you links directly to the book, which you can either go through to find there, or you can look at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, any of the places that you would normally go to buy books. We're on the Target website as well. We're all over the place. So really, if you just type in the IVF Blueprint book, you should be able to find it one way or the other.
Awesome.
And the book is available in hardback, audiobook, and ebook.
Excellent. Is there anything else you would like to add today?
More than anything, we hope patients take hope out of this, that they can understand this, that this journey is possible, that they will make it through to the end, and that there's a huge team of people on their side rooting for them, not just their own family and their own clinic, but really the IVF world in general is full of very good cheerleaders. And we all have that experience of being out in the world and somebody figures out what we do and they say, oh yeah, I am in the midst of my IVF cycle, or I had 2 babies from retrievals, or what have you. And it's pretty much always a cheerleading type of response of, I'm so happy for you. I'm so glad that happened. I'm sorry you're going through a struggle right now. There's hope and there's support for everybody. And we hope more than anything, people take that away from our book and the technical information that we're trying to provide in a bite-sized fashion.
Yeah. I always wanted to be a cheerleader. It's a true story. Every year in high school, I tried out. I never made the cheer team. And I'm making up for that. The only thing, I don't wear is a tiny little skirt, but I feel like I'm waving pom-poms every single day. Thank you so much, Dr. Abby Eblen, Dr. Carrie Bedient, and Dr. Susan Hudson for sharing your insights today. And I can't wait for our listeners to read the IVF Blueprint. It truly is such an incredible resource for anyone navigating IVF, or your friends or family members. They should get a copy too, so that they know what you're going through. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Egg Whisperers Show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts so you never miss a conversation like this. Thank you all for joining. Keep sparkling, keep asking questions and learning, because remember, the more you know, the better it will go.